Hello everyone, I'm Henry and welcome to episode 6 of series Dream It, Build It by Seattle Vietnamese Professional SVP and Vietnam Tech Society VTS. SVP and VTS are two non-profit organizations that focus on the growth of Vietnamese people in Seattle and in the tech industry. Dream It, Build It is a series where we invite high-profile and successful Vietnamese leaders to inspire Vietnamese students, professionals. We want to show you that everything is possible. You just have to dream it and go build it. Our guest speaker is Linh Dao Smooke. She is the Chief Operating Officer at HackerNoon. HackerNoon is built for technologists to read, write, and publish. HackerNoon are a community of 12,000 writers with 4 million monthly readers. And yesterday, Coil, the web monetization provider, led a 1 million investment in HackerNoon at an 11.5 million pre-money valuation. And it's some amazing company, and we are very lucky to have their COO talking with us today. So good morning and welcome to the show, Linh. How are you doing?
Thank you, Henry, for that glowing introduction. I'm very flattered. Yeah, I'm doing great. It's 10 a.m. here in the mountains. Very sunny day. I'm ready to work.
Ready to work. All right, perfect. So for this interview, we're gonna start out 30 minutes talking, and then I'm gonna let the floor for all the people on this call to have a question for you. So first, first we're gonna go through your background because I really want to show the people that they can relate to you, right? We are Vietnamese too. We went through a struggle, and then we're gonna be successful, and that's the message that I want to show to everyone watching. And then gonna go deep into HackerNoon, like your role, what do you do, how do you turn traffic into revenue, and running this company. So first of all, can you tell us more about your background? Where did you grow up, and why did you decide to go study abroad?
Yeah, of course. So hi everybody, thank you for joining today, as well as the people who will watch it later. I'm very flattered to be giving back a little bit to the Vietnamese community specifically. The past 3-4 years I've been focused more on the tech industry in general, and some part of it has got to do with Vietnamese tech, but a small part, and I definitely want to improve the presence, then elevate and amplify the voices of Vietnamese tech professionals in the larger context of the tech industry for sure, because we have some awesome people, here. So a little bit about myself. My name is Linh, and I was born Dao Ngọc Linh, and my maiden name, and then my married name is Linh Dao Smooke because my husband is David Smooke. Was born and raised in Hanoi, a very normal, I'm not a rich kid, very normal life. My dad is a musician and my mom works for the export and import department of a textile company. Yeah, so up until I was 16 or 17 years old, I wasn't even sure that I was gonna go abroad or study. My most sure and safest route honestly would be to go to foreign trade university or something like that in Hanoi, and I don't know, have a degree in economics and maybe work for the government afterwards, a very standard linear trajectory of what a Hanoian girl would do. But I think it was really my mom who very valued and still values education that insisted I applied for this little program called United World College, and it was a scholarship program for, at the time, 4 Vietnamese students every year. And now the number of scholarships have increased to, I think, to 15 range a year. So I can go back to that. But yeah, that was really a pivotal point when I was learning about that program for really any kid in Vietnam to learn more about the world and to kind of burst out of that bubble and go into the world So I applied, and I was lucky enough to be selected in the final round. And then when the selection committee asked me, like, which school do you want to go to? I just kind of, for whatever reason, said India. Like, I didn't think much of it. I thought it would be a good destiny, and it was close enough so my parents wouldn't be too worried. But yeah, like, I was just intrigued by India. So then I went to India, United World College, Mahindra in India, or as we lovingly call it, Muki. I think there's one Muki here today in the audience. And yeah, that was the year when I was almost 17 that my life just literally changed course, like completely for the better. I was very privileged to learn more about my 200 friends. It's a very small school from, I think, 75 different countries. And for the first time, it was like my eyes were open to just like issues and global stuff and ideologies and values that are very kind of were far and seemed foreign to me at the time, because in Vietnam we was taught and we were conditioned with a specific set of values and beliefs. And like now I went to this very global school and I was exposed to like this whole new world, right? So that was Muki. It was in 2007 when I was 17. I studied there for 2 years and I applied to Brown University early. The reason being I was really intrigued by their focus, their progressive ideologies and their focus on equality, like, equality for both men and women, equality for like people of different colors. Like it's one of the first universities in that corner of the US to implement those progressive ideals. So I was really intrigued by that. So I applied early and I got in. And thanks to UWC scholarships, it kind of bleed over into the 4 years at Brown too. So I got a little bit of scholarship from UWC and then the rest from Brown. So that was also very lucky. You can see like the consistent theme in my story really has got, I think, a lot to do with luck. Like, people forget that often that, like, why can they get to that? Like, did they just like was extremely, I don't know, like intelligent and like above average or something? I don't know. Like, honestly, I don't know if my abilities and my intelligence and all of that are above average. Maybe it is. But I think the most important factor is I was just at the right place at the right time a lot of the times. And I was given opportunity and I capitalized on those opportunities. Along the way. Many people might have been given those opportunities just as I was, but maybe they didn't like get there in time, So I think there's a lot of that, a lot of luck involved. I got into Brown and then I studied for 4 years there for a degree in international development. So the focus is just discussing politics and sociology and economics, a combination of those three, as well as like learning on the ground and applying those theories into a practical project that you could present at the end of the 4 years. So then my focus in my junior year when I chose was education, because I feel incredibly grateful, for the opportunities that I received throughout my 2 years at UWC and then my 3 years at Brown, that I think I should study more and highlight more the importance of education. So yeah, I went back to Vietnam in my junior year, I believe, to found a little project called the Creative Kid Project, a CKP. I think they've since changed the name to just CKP to broaden the scope of the program to not just a little one-off project, but more to foster creativity and knowledge in all students. So at the time, it was just a 30-student project for middle school students in Hanoi that will have them go through 7 days of intense training and fun activities, as well as talks and all fun stuff. And I believe that at the time there wasn't anything like that focused on middle school students. Why middle school students? I was thinking to myself, I think once you got to high school, you basically had to be pushed to choose a direction, right? Like you had to like care about university, you have to choose your concentration, your major, like already have some kind of a direction in life. Otherwise, like why, like what university would you choose? Or if you know, happen to not choose university, then you have to do something with your life. Whereas in the middle school, you still open-minded enough to be open to so many possibilities, and you are old enough to discuss things, you know, in depth. So I think that was why we chose that age group, and it has proven to be incredibly helpful for not just the students themselves, but for all of the volunteers that are involved. I founded it in 2012, and it's been 8 years, and it's still running. Yeah, still running every single year, and they are thinking of expanding it to maybe more cities, and you know, like all over Vietnam, or maybe hopefully at some point in Asia or something like that. So I feel very, very good that I decided, you know, in that year 2012 to go back to Vietnam and did that. So then I think because of my focus and my passion for education in school, that when I graduated from university, I got mostly jobs in education, either like research on education, or then I got a teaching job at Everest Education, which is an innovative company that focusing on technology and the intersection between technology and classroom activities. So I had that, and then because of that job, I also got into Minerva, which is a San Francisco-based company with very small batches of students every year, sending to 7-8 different locations in the world, and they study 100% online. They study via this thing called the Active Learning Forum. And I don't know, like before, when I was still working at Minerva, trying to explain to especially like strict Asian parents about this idea, like a lot of them, you know, turned skeptical about like how would an online global school works, right? But then like the coronavirus pandemic happens, and everybody like goes to Zoom, and all of a sudden the advance of technology and how it's so important and very possible in being an important part of education. So I thought it was very interesting. Like if I were still working for Minerva today, I would have so much to say to these strict parents, and they probably would be a lot more receptive to this idea, right? And of course, after Minerva, which was why I met David, my now husband. It was one of my business trips in San Francisco, and then I just met him randomly on the street. And he at the time was developing kind of a company that was gonna publish a ton of content. So he actually started with like 16 different publications, ranging from like fitness to technology to poetry and all kinds of things. But the one publication that kind of emerged out of it all was HackerNoon, and it was very niche community that focused on the voice of technology, the software developers, crypto enthusiasts, startup founders, those kind of people. And yeah, we found a niche, and I first joined just as David did, part-time. So everyone who has ever been involved in HackerNoon has been part-time to begin. So I joined part-time. I try to come up with a revenue model for the HackerNoon audience that is not too intrusive to the reading experience. Then I became the COO, and now here we are.
And now here we are. So, what a journey that you've been through. Man, that's amazing. Oh, that's covered a lot of my questions. So
sorry. You told me to like say about my background.
Exactly.
I just told you like how I got here.
Yeah, that's perfect. That's perfect. All right. So let's jump right into HackerNoon. So you are the Chief Operating Officer of HackerNoon. Like, what exactly is your responsibility?
Yeah, so I wear many hats. We have a very small team. Our ratio of team to writers is 1 to 1428. So we have one staff member to every 1,500 writers. So you can imagine the amount of work and the kinds of all kind of various different responsibilities that each member has to do. On a daily basis. I do anything from writing to our community to meeting with sponsors, devising strategy for our next year, to talking to our employees, checking in how they are doing, to hiring new people and firing people. Hiring people, not fun. Let me tell you, not fun. It's one of my least favorite part of the job, but as a CEO, you have to do that. So yeah, I pretty much do things to keep the light on at our company. Yeah,
that's amazing. So HackerNoon, you guys produce a lot of content, like article from 12,000 writers. So you have a lot of traffic. So how do you turn those traffic into revenue?
Yeah, let me talk about the traffic part first, because I think it's important to understand the business model of this company. So if you think about traditional media, right, we have things like the New York Times, Washington Post, Wall Street Journal, that kind of things where there's a very rigorous multi-layer process for a piece to get to the front page or to get published at all. So that's traditional media, that's journalism for the most part. Like there's like opinion pieces that you can submit to the publication and get that published. But for the most part, it's very heavy process from the idea when it like first comes to your head to when it gets to the people. So that's traditional media. Now we're in the age of social media, right? We have kind of armchair economists and armchair experts all over the place posting their opinions on statuses, on note, doing little republishing of their blogs on Twitter, on Facebook, and GitHub, all over the place. And that's totally like a wild west right there, right? Anyone can do anything on social media. And I mean, lately people have been really questioning the role of social media in controlling the narratives and controlling the content of the web, right? How, like, do they bear any responsibility? Like, do they control what people get to say or don't get to say? Things like that. So Twitter, for example, has placed this fact check functionality into the tweets, and like very recently it fact checked the president of the United States himself, right? So that's a whole different world. So I think to think about HackerNoon effectively, you think about these two worlds, and basically we exist somewhere in the overlap space between these two. So we're not exactly a traditional journalism where the process is so heavy that it takes months even for a piece to get out. The average number of days for a piece to get out on HackerNoon from the contributors is about 3 days. So from the moment that you write the piece to when you submit the piece, you can get published maybe even on the same day to a couple of days, because you have problem with grammars or like the structure of the piece is not sound enough, for example. So yeah, we're not traditional media, but we're also not social media, wherein there's literally no filter for what you can say, to your audience. There is always going to be a human who will check your story. We call it the second human rule, wherein an editor, and we have 4 editors at HackerNoon, and now out of a team of 11 people, right? So 4 editors. So it's a big part of our company, who will always check in with the piece and give it 10 minutes of intense, focused editorial time. So it could be like just check if your grammar is good, kind of tying it in with the bigger picture with themes of what's going on that day, putting a tag at the end of your story. So a tag is how a website can curate and distribute the stories to even more websites. It's a very good practice for search engine optimization or SEO. So if you like put, let's say yesterday I wrote a piece on my advice, my 4 words or less advice for young professionals, it's called Go For It Anyway. I put like a Go For It Anyway tag, career advice tag, startup advice tag, all of those tags. Now then, when it starts to index on different sites around the net, people will be able to find it easier. So then that's also a job of an editor, which is to make sure to maximize the distributing potential of that story. So yeah, so that is in a nutshell how I can explain why we get the traffic, right? Because we're not exactly traditional media, we're not exactly social media. We're trying to amplify the voice of contributors And in theory, anyone, literally
Mm-hmm.
anyone, can submit a piece on HackerNoon. You know, you don't have to pay to submit a piece to
Mm-hmm.
HackerNoon. You don't have to go through extremely lengthy, rigorous process to be
Mm-hmm.
able to publish on HackerNoon. But also, there is some weight to your story because it has been gone through an editorial process. It's been deemed good enough by an
Mm-hmm.
editor to show to our 4 million monthly readers. Yeah, like if you have more question on that, then I can expand more. But I think your original question was, so how do I capitalize on that
Exactly.
transitive revenue, right?
Yeah.
So that's another thing with media is it's the chicken and egg and problem wherein if you don't optimize for traffic, then you can't really monetize. But if
Mm-hmm.
you monetize too early, then you will cannibalize your traffic
Mm.
because you put so many barriers to the reading experience. So, for example, if you
Mm.
go through any traditional media site these days, chances are you're going to be bombarded with like
Exactly.
pop up and have you signed up to this newsletter? Did you pay us the $1 or the $5
Uh-huh.
we ask? And
Right.
like all of those things, right? Like it's just incredibly painful to be able to access content nowadays. Why? Because they really need to get money out of some of
Exactly.
these content,
Yep.
right? Either via an ad or a subscription, a paywall model. So when we try to think about how we should capitalize this traffic, we were trying so hard to be cognizant of not cannibalizing the traffic and not turning readers away because we put an ad on the story or because we make it so hard for readers to get the story by charging for the story.
Mm-hmm.
So we don't want to do either of that. And we vow to never put a paywall on
Mm-hmm.
HackerNoon. So we will not charge a reader whatsoever to read a piece on HackerNoon. So a HackerNoon story will always be free. But what we do and we are able to do is to
Mm-hmm.
put a native ad that is basically part of the site as
Mm.
opposed to a Google AdSense that just like pops up and like it's just very annoying at you on the sidebars and on the bottom and like as a pop. So that's what Google AdSense does. And what it does is it also targets you personally, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you have ever clicked on anything that's of interest to
Right.
you, like all of a sudden the next day you saw it all over Instagram and Facebook and like everywhere. So we don't want to do ad that personally attacks or targets you as a person. What we do want to do is to have an ad that is relevant to the content that you're reading. If
Mm.
you go to any story with a tag, let's say software development, we have a
Mm-hmm.
company called Sentry that does really good systematic testing for software development companies. We put an ad for Sentry on the tag page as well as on the stories, the bottom with that tag.
Mm-hmm.
So that's ad by content relevancy, not by you as an individual person. I don't care who you are, how old you are, if you're
Mm-hmm.
male or female, the geography, I don't, none of
Mm-hmm.
those were taken into account. But
Right.
what were taken into account is that, well, you are on this page, you're reading the content
Mm-hmm.
specific to this niche. I want to show you this ad. So that's one way we capitalize. And the other way is this thing across the top of the HackerNoon page. It's called the yellow banning ad. Today it's this .tech domain guide. And it's because it's very native to HackerNoon itself. It's never going to be blocked by app blocker. Like
Mm.
a lot of hackers use blockers because they're annoyed with Google AdSense and
Mm-hmm.
geo targeting ads. So they
Yep.
would like use all kinds of blog, and it's like another industry in and of itself, right? This very fostering industry of ad
Yep.
blocking, but our native ad is not blocked, and it's very non-intrusive, really. Like if you want to read a story on HackerNoon, what you see 90% of the screen is just text. There's
Mm.
no distraction whatsoever. There's no sidebar. The text overbleed and the image just kind of cross the board. So the main focus, and we talk about this with the product team literally every day. How do we make sure that the reading experience is the cleanest and serves the readers the most? So there's no distraction when they come to read, because that's their sole purpose when they come to their site really is to gain knowledge, to
Mm-hmm.
gain access to the stories. So without paywall, without that, we need to be able to have an ad that is just the minimalistic, the most
Mm-hmm.
minimalistic that we can make so that they can focus on what truly matters, which is the content on the screen. Now, this is not perfect yet. The revenue is still not enough for us to achieve profitability.
Mm.
So on the day-to-day, we still spend more than we gain money. But I think enough people see the value in a clean reading destination that gives access to readers without any paywall, without any pop-up ads, anything like that. And with the kind of traffic that we have, that I think down the road, we would get either to profitability, or we will get enough investment from a bigger company to be able to make this sustainable for the team.
I see.
So,
That's a great answer. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yep. So I also want to learn more about your recent experience raising money for HackerNoon. Just like I introduced earlier, you got $1 million from coin. So can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, sure. So in order to tell the story, it actually dates back to when I founded the Creative Pitch Project at CKP.
Really?
Now, yeah.
All the way back.
All the way back. Now, this is not the first time we raised money. The first time we raised money was from equity crowdfunding.
Mm-hmm.
So the concept of equity crowdfunding is before the Jobs Act of 2015, only accredited investors can invest in a private American company. So if you don't have a net worth of, I think, minimum $1 million or something, you can't invest in a private company. But after Jobs Act of 2015, the federal government allowed anyone like you or me to be able to invest a minimum of $100 in any private company, as long as they go through an equity crowdfunding, some kind of a platform that allows that to happen. So we chose Start Engine, and we were able to raise the maximum amount allowed for crowdfunding round regulation crowdfunding for a company like ours of 1.07 million. So that was back in end of 2018 and beginning of 2019. And this is our second round of 1 million from one company, Coil, and putting the post-money valuation of the company at $12.5 million. So that's the landscape of this raise. Now, so in order to tell the story, back in 2012, when I founded CKP, I actually founded with a fellow Brown student. His name is Evan Schwartz, and he was gonna go to Vietnam that summer of 2012, and it was just like asking for any Vietnamese person, give him recommendations on places to go and where to stay, that kind of thing. But then he also said, I'm very interested in education, and that's why I went to Vietnam. I want to learn more about the education system in Vietnam. And I'm like, oh my God, that's what I'm doing too. Like, why don't we meet, and talk more on this? And then after a couple of meetings, we came up with the idea for CKP. And we went back to Vietnam that summer, recruited a couple more founders and volunteers, or we call them facilitators. So yes, all FATCs, there's have a place in my heart for FATCs. They're awesome people. But anyway, we did that with Evan. And yeah, that was it. It was a very fun summer. Didn't know it's gonna turn out, or it was gonna be any annual thing in the first place. But I loved it, and people, the facilitators loved it, and they went on to do 2013, 2014, all the way up to 2019 was the last one, and now they're preparing for the next year too, which is awesome. Now, fast forward from that story to 2018, when we were trying to crowdfund, I was struggling with the idea, how can we make HackerNoon sustainable? How can we, because at the time, we were heavily reliant on another company's software, medium.com. We have to, and again, it's a lengthy story, but in order to understand the story, you also have to understand Medium. The Medium, at first, it was just kind of like HackerNoon. They open for everyone, and no one has to pay anything in order to read any content. All fine and good. And we were building our software on medium.com, building our community on medium.com until about September of 2018, where they would just all of a sudden decide that they need to put paywall on most of their stories, and you can't run an ad, even if the ad is minimal and non-intrusive on anything that's hosted on medium.com. And now, all of our stories are still on HackerNoon.com, but the back end behind those stories at the time was still Medium. So we had to break up with them because we don't want to put paywall on anything. And, you know, on top of that, they insultingly offered a very low number to acquire the company. Like, you can't even believe how low it is. So we like rejected that offer, obviously. And we're like, okay, in order to continue as HackerNoon as a brand, we have to move on, which was why we had to raise the crowdfunding back in 2018. So then I was thinking, okay, I'm raising money. We published 3 niches of content: software development, startups, and cryptocurrency/blockchain. And Evan, my friend back in 2012, who founded CKP with me, I know that he was working for Ripple, which is the 3rd largest cryptocurrency after Bitcoin and Ethereum. So I was thinking of him. I'm like, maybe, you know, this could turn out. Messaged him, introduced me to his marketing team at the time, but that did not turn out. They weren't interested in like a further partnership. However, at the end of our crowdfunding that year, so it's 2019 now, in March, the ex-CTO, his name is Stefan Thomas, learned about our crowdfunding effort. I could only imagine probably via like a Slack channel from Evan or maybe some of his colleagues or something. Like, for some reason, the name HackerNoon has circulated within the Ripple company. Okay, I don't know if it's directly from Evan, but that's the story I want to tell. And Stefan was like, wow, they almost reached their maximum of 1.07 million. It's like a little bit over $1 million now. I'm going to close this round. I'm going to finish the rest so that they fully subscribed for that round. So that was Stefan. Now, Stefan, about only 3 months earlier than that, now this was March of 2019, I think back in December of 2018, he had left Ripple as their chief technology officer to found this company called Coil. Coil is a web monetization solution that their mission is to allow websites and content creators around the world to be able to get streamed micropayments, to get streamed money from readers, from interested readers, directly to their digital wallet. So the web monetization idea is extremely like just relevant to the time, because cryptocurrency is something that, you know, was on the rise at the time. People were like trying to understand a little bit more. Banking was just struggling with micropayments, because imagine if you're like trying to stream something like $1 from me to you, right? The bank charges alone would be like 30 cents and 2.9% of that $1 in the first place. So by the time that, you know, money you've got from me to you, it will be like almost next to nothing. Whereas with cryptocurrency, with blockchain, the premise is there's just no middleman, right? Like the money can seamlessly, automatically go from one person to another without going to anyone else. So the idea of micropayment, which is prime to mature during that time. So then now back to Evan and Stefan basically came up with this thing called the intellectual protocol that allow micropayment to happen seamlessly. And for you, for example, if you go on YouTube, something like that, and you really like that creator, depending on how long you spend watching that video, that's how much you stream the micropayment to that creator directly. This is why, like, you know, if you look at the rise of like Patreon and all of this, you know, from the pandemic, it makes a lot of sense for this industry to be just blooming with people wanting a solution to their creativity without going through the bank, without going through traditional places that charge you a lot of money. So yeah, it's just all by chance that you know, I later on learned that Stefan was founding Coil, and Coil was providing web monetization, and Evan was actually the co-author of the paper upon which Coil was founded, blah blah blah. And then 2 years later, now we're at a point where we want to take HackerNoon further to the next step. And one of the things that we have been thinking about from day one is how do we reward writers, right? Because as I mentioned earlier, we don't charge writers or readers or anyone to be on HackerNoon, but we also have not paid them, right? And like a lot of people have asks us the questions of, will you ever get to the point where you reward writers for what they do? So I think partnering with Koi was a step in a very good direction, where we can try to double our toes in that world, to try to like basically think of it as viable, to provide a web monetized solution to writers being on HackerNoon. Now, if you go on HackerNoon these days, you go on any writer's profile page, you would see a little sentence that say people have spent X amount of time on HackerNoon. Now that right there is the money, right? Because if you spend like 1 hour, I think Koi stream like 36 cents. If you spend like 2 hours, that's like 36 times 2. So I personally have generated like a month of reading time, right? So the amount of money would be small to begin with. Like, you know, don't get me wrong, this is not going to be like a financially sustainable way for writers to like, you know, quit their job and be on HackerNoon. But it is a very, I think, important first step in basically putting some kind of value, not just distribution value, on people's time and effort, you know, writing on HackerNoon. And I think the first thing we're going to do is, for anyone that doesn't install this web monetization solution on their profile, we're going to pull it all together in one big fund called the Back to the Internet pool. And this will be used for donation to charity, because we're not in the business to capitalize on writers' earnings, you know, as part of our revenue. That's not what we want to do. But what we do want to encourage is, even if the earning is small to begin with, you still can do something cool with the earning itself, such as to donate to a charity that better the internet. So yeah, that's the nature of the relationship with Koi. And they have been awesome, like amazing people to work with. And their chief growth officer, who used to be the CFO at Imager, which is this very large community, competitor to a bunch of imaging solution. I think it's the top 30 site in the world, will join me and David in the HackerNoon board. So his expertise and his insight into growing community of millions of creators will really strengthen our position in this industry. Very happy to have Jonathan with us.
Great, man. That's a great answer. So it covered a lot of questions too. So I guess now we are at the 45 minutes into the show. I guess I will let the audience to ask you questions. Anyone? So I already saw some questions from the people in here typing out. Actually, let's go with this question. Like, someone said that how do you compete with other like website, like Medium, like what is this, like HackerNews, Quora, and Twitter? So like what is special about HackerNoon?
Yeah, so I think the umbrella philosophy we have with HackerNoon is that we don't have to be a zero-sum game with all these awesome sites in the world that trying to contribute and make just the internet more accessible and content on the internet more accessible. It shouldn't be a zero-sum game. Like, their gain is not our loss, I don't think. The more people want to publish on just the internet in general, the better it is for everyone involved. And in terms of our unique value prop, right? Like our value proposition when it comes to HackerNoon compared to other sites, I think we just very niched. So we publish technologists. So these are some of the people that, some of them might have like a blog, like yourself. I saw like you have like a personal blog, right? But a lot of them traditionally are not the strongest and loudest voice in blogging. Like most of the time when it comes to telling a story, it's like the founder or like the marketing professionals of that company who would do the job. Whereas like the software developers, like the actual people who do the coding, who do the job of building the thing, don't get to tell the story from their perspective very often. And then another thing, which is our advantage, is we don't publish like newsy, like breaking news and like headline grabbing stuff, which is very, very prevalent in the blockchain and cryptocurrency industry. It's mostly just like clickbait. So we don't do that. Instead, from the get-go, we do opinions and in-depth analysis on the industry, which I think is also, like the opinions of the expert. Like if you think about it, most of the narratives on the world today are shaped either by journalists, people who are like professional writers, or like the extremely influential people, influencers, like the little, I don't know, like a very good but not that famous or internet famous software developer from whatever Amazon wouldn't have that same gravitas when it comes to telling this story. So I think it's a very unique thing that we trying to achieve in amplifying the voice of technologists and of professionals that otherwise won't be able to do that on a lot of other platforms.
I see. That's great. So for the participant in this video call, I have allowed you to unmute yourself. So if you want to turn on your camera, unmute yourself and ask the question to Linh, feel free. And then if there's none, then I'm just gonna keep asking the question from the submitted list of questions. So I see
I saw some in the chat as well.
Exactly. Yeah, there's a lot of questions submitted to you. So yeah. One of the questions that let's go with this one. Where do you see HackerNoon in like 5 years from now? And actually, 5 years is kind of far. So what about just like 2 years from now, like medium and then long term?
I think first and foremost, the most ideal scenario for us right now is not to have to raise more money. Like I know it's a little bit counterintuitive for some startups to think about it that way, like just keep grabbing VC money and like do all of these things to optimize and capitalize on growth and maybe like cash out, right? I think that's a viable path for a lot of startups, but I don't think it's viable or it's most ideal for us. Let me explain why. We have never got any VC money because once you got VC money, a lot of the time they're going to control the decisions and the strategies that you make in your company. Right now, David and I still own by far the majority shares in this company, 75%, and 12%, which is the ownership of the crowdfunding, also goes to David because most of the crowdfunder defer their voting rights to the CEO as part of the crowdfunding. So we have like the destiny of this company is in our hand, and it's really hard for us to give that up. We don't want to be a company that's like someone else's child. So getting VCs and raising a lot of money, I don't think would be our next path. Not to say that we will like rule that out 100%, but very, very unlikely. The best solution to not have to raise more money or to get any VC money is to be a profitable enough business, which is, like oldest model of business is, right? Like you have to be making enough money to cover your expenses. Like that's just economic 101. And in order to do that, we have to better all aspects of the company, from editorial to product. We are a software company now as well. We built our own content management system. Like everything you see on HackerNoon is coded by our developers. So we have to improve our product, increase the rate of publishing, and make sure to get enough sponsors for our company that, we don't have to raise more money. So I think that would be the medium term. Hopefully we can achieve that by 2021. That would be great. But I think the 5 years plan would be, there's so many directions that we can go as a software and a publication. One way would be to license out our software. So we have a very proprietary, good system, like good enough for thousands, like 12,000, tens of thousands of people to submit stories. We get like anywhere from like 50 to 100 submissions per day. And we only accept, and the editorial team only accept about I want to say like 50 to 60% of them. So the proprietary software is good. It's able to withhold a lot of traffic, and to make sure that a contributor can submit their stories, and editor can review the story and can publish the story. So I think that kind of a platform maybe is also of desire to many niches. It doesn't have to be in the tech industry only. I think it could be across many different verticals, like fitness, or I don't know, like health blog, whatever. So that's one way. Another way I think we could go could be to go all in with the cryptocurrency blockchain world and tokenize the reading time of every single contributor and reader on HackerNoon. Now that's a very lofty and very kind of out there ambitious goal, and for that to happen we probably have to raise like a lot of money. But I mean, at the end of it, we might be at the forefront of Internet 3.0. Like we might be at the forefront of one of the first sites to be able to reward every single action of the reader and the writer on the site with a token. And I do think that cryptocurrency and blockchain will be the future of the internet. It will be like the next internet, I think, which if we can get on that early, that could be awesome. But I'm not sure. And then the third one, which is I think very likely and very, you often see that in media landscape, which is consolidation and acquisition. We can totally be bought by another bigger company that's having more resources than we do, and maybe we go on and do something else, and that's the exit strategy that all the investors are asking you, like, what's your exit strategy? So I don't know. It's less exciting for me to like think about that right now, but it could also be a possibility. I think we're smart enough, me and David, that we can go on to the next stage of our career doing something else as well. But right now, like my heart and mind is 100% completely on HackerNoon.
I see. Cool. So next question. Oh, actually, there's someone want to ask some question. You want to unmute yourself?
Hello.
Hi.
Can you hear me?
Hello.
Yeah,
yes.
we can hear you.
Hi, this is Max, and I'm currently in Toronto, Canada. Yeah, so I'm a friend of Henry, and thank you for inviting me here. And Ling, I'm really, although I haven't been to HackerNoon often, but I really like the idea that you're going forward with. And I'd like to touch more on how you are planning to create more incentive for contributing writers to contribute to the platform. So besides Coral, do you think that you'll also think of, like, let's say, partnership programs so that you can provide maybe non-monetary incentives to contributing writer, or maybe other form of things that can be valuable to them, like say like help them tap to a network or connect them with like audiences or people within the industry, things like that?
Yeah, that's certainly on our mind. Thank you, Max, for asking the question. I've never been to Toronto. Is that cool?
Well, to be fair, like the snow only stopped like I say 3 weeks ago, and and we've been having like hot days, and then it rain and stormy, and then like suddenly it's just like all sunny again. Like right now, I don't know like what's gonna be like within 2 hours. I'm scared.
Yeah,
I want to go outside for a bit.
The next step, but like more and more when I look at the US these days, I'm like, maybe Canada is not out of the question after all. Anyway, that's off tangent. Yeah, to answer your question, a lot of the incentive in the early days and to this day for HackerNoon contributors is distribution. So because we have grown a large enough audience and we haven't charged anyone ever for anything to read on HackerNoon, that's why that explains the traffic that we have early days as well as now, that we, in order to do better by the writers, we just have to be better at distributing their content. So that was our thesis, is just increase the rate of publishing, make sure that we promote the stories everywhere. Social media, we index the stories well, we provide good editorial feedback to the story. Then whatever they want to get out of publishing on HackerNoon, they can achieve. So if you go on the profile, one of the things that we highlight the most is their call to action. So might just say like book a meeting with me, but you can like direct resources to like a cause you care about, or like hire me, like if you're like a professional looking to get your resume out there. Think of it as like the LinkedIn publishing block posts as well. Like, they in recent years have focused a lot on growing that professional network of people who are looking for jobs or who are transitioning from one career to another, or who hiring, to also basically put context to their resume and to their project, wherever they're working on. So that was our thesis, is let's be better at distribution. Now, in terms of other incentive for writers, we do have a small group, a couple of small groups. So on Facebook, we have a small group. On Discourse, we also have Telegram, LinkedIn, all of these across different networks for people to talk to each other. You're right that, like, in order for HackerNoon to be more sticky, as like closer to like a traditional social network, we have to make it like there's a reason for them to come back. Maybe making the software more of a collaboration tool. So instead of like just doing like a little commenting at the end of the story, you might want to make the commenters or the readers more of a collaborator with the story. So like put, annotations to like different concepts, or like do a very in-depth response to the stories. And maybe we can allow several people to co-author a piece so that it just has more depth and gravitas to the piece itself. So I think like going into that direction of like community editors and making the experience on HackerNoon more collaborative would be good. It's really hard actually to build something that's also a commenting and collaborating system as well as just like a regular publishing thing, because you need to understand the users. You need to know what is their reason in the first place to come to this platform and what make them stay. So we're still learning that every single day, but right now our thesis is still making the distribution better and build a better platform so that they have a more reason to stay.
Cool.
But can I add a bit more to that? Like, can I have a follow-up question?
Sure, go ahead.
Yeah, because like the reason I asked about like a kind of incentive or partnership program is that something I noticed with LinkedIn is that like a few of my friends are doing is that they like apparently, I don't know how official their partnership with LinkedIn is, but like they are technically like a LinkedIn campus editor. So in a way, like they write stuff, they post on LinkedIn, and like they get to be associated with the brand, and have like some kind of like certificate of recognition. So
Yeah.
So I was wondering if eventually HackerNoon would reach a place where people can probably like put it on the LinkedIn, like I'm a contributor to HackerNoon, and like that increased their prestige within
So
like
if
the
you go
LinkedIn
to
community. Oh, that exists already?
Yeah, if you go to HackerNoon right now, it says like we have like hundreds of people working for us, which is not true. We only have 7 full-time people, 4 part-time people. So like a lot of our contributors and shareholders already talk about like their involvement with HackerNoon. I think what you're getting at also is like a gamification system wherein so right now people relying on like the street cred, right, of like being on HackerNoon. That's so cool. I'm like getting all of this front page traffic, and like I'm screenshotting my stats page, or like saying, wow, my company gets on HackerNoon. But like, how do you also gamify the whole software so that people get batch of like, oh, you did X thousands of minutes today, or like some miles today, you march a lot today, you do this today. Like getting them to the next level require a lot of gamification going on. I don't think we have, like, if you look at our budget right now, like it's like literally less than 2% of our budget is spent on marketing, just because we have enough, like we have 12,000 contributing writers and 4 million readers. We have enough people that know about the brand. It's still very niche. It's not like, I don't know, Reddit or whatever, but it's niche, but it's big enough that we haven't had to spend too much on marketing to advertise the value of publishing on HackerNoon. I think once we are able to bring people over to our platform, we have to make them stay, and we have to make them have like just more reasons to keep contributing.
I see.
Do you also think that there will be one day when HackerNoon would also be available in other languages, so that every article would be, let's say like Vietnamese? Because like I know a site like Vietcetera, like they do decently in pushing out like Vietnamese and English content side by side. So I think that's something going forward would be like amazing.
I know. Yes. Yeah. I actually had a talk with my husband David just before this call about localization of the app. So traffic is 75% desktop and 25% mobile. So we like haven't even like gone into that development space of optimizing for mobile traffic yet. Now, once you have an app, then it'll be a little bit easier to localize that app into different languages. And we don't necessarily have to go that route. I'm saying like make the site into like different apps or like different localization versions of HackerNoon itself. We do have, I think anecdotally, we do have like some pieces in like Chinese and Russian or like even Vietnamese, but it's like a very, very small portion of the overall HackerNoon library. In order to do translation well, I mean, that's a beast in and of itself. Like if you have ever pasted anything on Google Translate, like you would understand this problem. Like if you rely on just technology and AI, it probably will not be enough. Like you'll need safeguard people who check the quality of the content itself. Like you probably would have to do the YouTube model of relying on crowdsourced labor. Like if you want to translate this and do this, like if you're like an expert in that, do this. I think that's the model that a lot of good tech companies do, is just to rely on the power of the crowd, of a large quantity of people. So I think if we ever get to the point where there's enough interest, right now it's like 33% US traffic and then 66% the rest of the world. And a lot of those countries are like English speaking as well. I do have some Vietnamese readers, but it's very, very small. It's maybe like less than like 2% or something. So if we ever get to a point where it's global enough that we like really, really need at least like 3 or 4 other major languages, I think we can think seriously about developing app and technologies or crowdsourcing strategies to make this more friendly international.
All right. Are you happy with the answer, Max?
I got a clap.
Yeah, thank you.
Do you have to run to another meeting, or do you have time for one last question?
No.
Okay.
I'm good.
All right, cool. The next person that want to ask you question is anh Song Ha. Do you want to?
Hi, Ling. Thank you for your very insightful sharing. I have one question about being persistent. I think to get to where you are today, you have to overcome a lot of challenges. And could you share one of the biggest challenges you have overcome recently? Because I think that could inspire many people to overcome their own challenges also.
Feel like an interview question that you have a job interview.
Yeah, tell me about that time where like it proves like all the things that I want to hire about.
Right.
I think being a Vietnamese American, I'm not Vietnamese American yet, just Vietnamese female person in technology, like I have all kinds of barriers stacked against me. But I think like on a day-to-day basis, I don't really have to think about that a lot because I was just, behind the screen doing what I do, running the company. But occasionally, things like sexism and racism and stuff like that would come up within like the very subtle ways people writing emails or addressing me as sir, because like they just assume that someone of this position would probably be a sir, or like whenever they reply all to me and my husband, but like only addressing David first and not me. So there's like subtle ways in which I still can see there's a long way to go for the tech industry in particular, but also just, I don't know, the world, the US, to like catch up with like the ideals of what people want. Like really at the end of the day, everyone just wants to be treated as a human, and not because of anything that are particular about them, like the color of the skin, the gender, all of that. The struggle for me is not really unique to a lot of I guess minorities in the US, right? Like we have to try, I was telling Henry earlier in the call, we had to try like 2 or 3 times as hard to be gaining the same amount of respect, in any industry, in tech in general. And it was just, it's just hard. Like it's not fair. It's something that's changing every single day. I think we still have a long way to go to get to a point where it doesn't matter that you're Vietnamese on a green card. You're still capable and have enough talent to be part of this company. Like I have this friend who like extremely smart. She's graduated from college, but like already got a great job in New York. And she's like worrying about the status of her visa. Like, she might as well not get the job, not because she's not capable, but because the government might do something to screw up the status of green card permanent resident applications based on work, because the OPT expired. So I think, like a struggle of a minority immigrant in the U.S., I think would require me to just sometimes like look back and be like, wow, look how far I come, but look how far I still have to go. And I really wish that the stories of people like me, as I told you guys earlier, like I grew up in a very normal family, and none of my parents, like they don't even speak English to this day. Like, very little. Like every time they would like Google Translate it, and they would be like, wait, what are you talking about? So they don't even speak English. Just very hardworking parents and caring parents. So the story, like if someone like me could make it in America, then I think other people could too. So yeah.
Thank you. So the essence is, if you have a dream, go build it, right?
Yay!
Cool. So we are 10 minutes over time. So I guess I'm gonna conclude this interview by saying thank you to Linh. You are such an inspirational leader. You show us that if you have a dream, go build it, and just go and just do it. Man. Linh wrote a lot of on HackerNoon, and you can go on HackerNoon and search for Linh, and you can read a lot of articles that she wrote. And she even wrote a very recent article about like student and her advice for the student and like people in general. So check out HackerNoon, and thank you very much for participating in this interview with Linh. We are very happy to have you with us today. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for having me. I'm very humbled and flattered by being here, and yeah, thank you for sending in the questions, everyone. Hope I can maybe meet some of you in person.
Right. Anytime that you go to Seattle, you for sure we're gonna be there to like welcome you. Or everywhere else.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. All right. Thank you, everyone. I'll see you another time. Bye.
Bye, everyone. Bye.